This video is brought to you by Blinkist. The first 100 people to go to Blinkist.com/geographics will get 1 week to try it out for free. You'll also get 25% off the cost of full membership. More on them in just a bit. It's been called humanity's constant companion. Every 75 or 76 years since the dawn of civilization, a bright object has streaked across Earth's skies, hypnotizing those below. The ancient Chinese and Babylonians recorded its movements. The Romans considered it a portent of defeat and destruction. In the medieval period, Genghis Khan is said to have proclaimed it his own personal star. Yet the great Khan was wrong. Far from being a star, the object was a comet, perhaps the most famous comet in history. Named after the British astronomer Edmund Halley, its regular visits would revolutionize our understanding of the solar system. Prior to Halley's discovery that this comet was the same one seen repeatedly across history, no one knew that comets orbited the sun. Even after the truth was uncovered, Halley's Comet remained a source of fascination and mystery. From the life and death of Mark Twain to the Challenger disaster via the Great Comet Panic of 1910, this is the tale of both Halley's Comet itself and how this one distant ball of ice and dust helped shape our modern world. If you were to jump in a handy TARDIS and travel back in time 4.5 billion years, you'd be in for a hell of a sight. Our solar system as we know it didn't exist back then. Instead, great clouds of dust swirled around our newborn sun, chunks of debris slowly over millions of years coalescing into solid objects. If you hung around long enough in this bygone age, you'd eventually see most of that gas and dust become the planets. But not all of it. Out at a place called the Snow Line, far enough away from our young star for solid ice to exist, a different class of objects would be forming. Eventually, these icy objects would get scattered out, joining a huge shell of debris surrounding our solar system called the Oort cloud. It's these primordial objects that would become our solar system's comets. Today we know of something in the region of 6,600 comets. The majority of these are long-period comets, beginning in the Oort cloud and swinging in towards the inner solar system on journeys that can take up to 1,000 years. But there's another class of comets, one with much shorter orbits. It's within these short-period comets that we find Halleys. Short-period comets are typically broken into separate classes, with the main two being Jupiter family comets and Halley-type comets. Most fall into the Jupiter family, meaning at some point in the distant past they got snared into Jupiter's gravity and now poodle around our neighborhood, whizzing past us every 20 years or so. But slightly over 100 fall into the Halley-type class, including, surprise, surprise, Halley's Comet. Former long-period comets that got disrupted by the gravity of Jupiter and Saturn, Halley types are the oddballs of the comet family, neither clinging to Jupiter like a bad prom date nor zooming all the way out to the Oort clouds to check in on old acquaintances. Their orbits can last anywhere from 20 years to 200, although Halley's itself clocks in at around 76. Exactly when it settled into this orbit is a matter of speculation. Some think 16,000 years ago, while others put the figure at more like 200,000. If the latter is true, that means this comet has been with us for almost the entirety of human history, streaking periodically through the night sky since our earliest ancestors evolved on the plains of Africa. A witness to every 76th year of our species' story. Well, on average at least. The length of Halley's journey actually changes depending on how its path gets disrupted by the outer planet's gravity. It may only take 74 years, or as many as 79. Still, there are some constants. It's always visible to the naked eye when passing Earth, and it's the only comet it's possible to see twice in one lifetime without using a telescope. But while Halley's can be seen near Earth, at other times it's nearly invisible. The core of every comet is something called its nucleus, a chunk of ice mixed with dust. When it swings by the sun, that ice turns to vapor and escapes, forming the bright long tail you see in the sky and shrouding the nucleus in a reflective corona, a process known as outgassing. But the nucleus of Halley's Comet has unbelievable amounts of dust in it, so much so that the entire 15-kilometer by 18-kilometer surface is almost pitch black. When not outgassing, it reflects just 3% of the light to fall on it, less than a lump of coal. That means Halley's, at different points in its orbit, is both one of the brightest and darkest objects in the night sky. Yet that dust does more than just make the comet look like a big, dirty snowball. As Halley zips through our solar system, it leaves a trail of debris in its wake. Every October and May, the Earth passes through that trail. The dust burns up in our atmosphere, becoming the Orionid and Eta Aquarid meteor showers. In other words, if you go outside around the 21st of October and see a shooting star, it's likely a fragment of our solar system's most famous comet. Cool as this is, though, it's only relatively recently that we've known these science facts. For most of human history, Halley's Comet was regarded not with wonder, but with awe and terror. 466 BC was a pretty sketchy year in ancient Greece. At some point that summer, a meteor the size of a wagon came crashing into the Hellespont Strait, scaring the living crap out of locals and creating an instant tourist attraction. If that wasn't enough, a huge fiery body then appeared in the night sky that didn't vanish for 75 days. Today, the 466 BC fireball is thought to be the first recorded sighting of Halley's Comet, with the contemporary meteor strike either being an asteroid the comet disrupted from orbit, or just a really weird coincidence. But while it was the first, the sighting in Greece isn't the only ancient record that we have for Halleys. Go through the history books and our constant companion is cropping up everywhere. In Han Dynasty China, for example, a broom star was reported in the sky in what we'd call 240 BC. The Babylonians, meanwhile, tracked its movements on clay tablets in both 164 and 87 BC. 2 orbits later, in 66 AD, Flavius Josephus thought that it looked like a sword and declared it had been an omen that the Romans would destroy Jerusalem's Second Temple. In fact, the comet's appearance generally seemed to have been linked in Roman times with stuff getting destroyed. Showing in 451 AD capped off Attila the Hun's legendary campaigns of conquest. Not that anyone knew these sightings were all the same comet, though. It can be easy to forget in a quick overview like this, but no one prior to Edmund Halley figured out that comets were capable of returning. So when Halley's Comet came cruising back for its closest ever encounter with Earth in April 837, people weren't all like, look, cool, the comet's come back. They were more like, the sky's on fire again, why? At just 5 million kilometers from Earth, Halley's in 837 dominated the night sky. Its tail is said to have stretched a third of the way across the horizon. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it caused terror everywhere. In Japan, Europe, Baghdad, and Imperial China, people freaked the hell out. Astronomers were summoned to kings, disasters were predicted, calamities prepared for. But it would be another 229 years before the predicted catastrophe struck, at least from one country's point of view. In 1066, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records a long-haired star appearing in the sky over England. If you know anything about British history, you'll know that 1066 is a major year. It's the year the Norman king William the Conqueror looked across the channel and decided it was time to live up to his nickname. That October, William's invading forces smashed those of English King Harold II at the Battle of Hastings. The Norman conquest was so total it forever altered English history. The language you're watching this in, well, it would be completely different without this one event. Of course, Halley's Comet didn't cause the Battle of Hastings any more than it caused the Romans to smash up the Second Temple. But William did consider its appearance as a good omen. When it came time to record his achievements in the massive art brag we call the Bear Tapestry, the comet featured prominently. Nor was William the only conqueror to link his good fortune with our celestial companion. 2 orbits later, in 1222, Genghis Khan is said to have both decided the comet was his own personal star and that it was telling him to take his Mongol hordes and invade Europe. While the invasion carried out by his heirs wouldn't be quite as successful as the Norman conquest, it would briefly establish the largest contiguous empire in human history. And note to any would-be conquerors out there, July 2061, the date Halley's next returns, is definitely one to pencil into the diary. Yet while Halley's Comet would witness some transformative moments in human history, the biggest moment came not from wars or conquest or meteor strikes, but from 2 men. 2 men armed with nothing more than some stuffy books and brains the size of your average planet. Together, Isaac Newton and Edmund Halley were going to change how we viewed the night sky forever. Now, before we continue with our story today, how about an app that will change the way that you view books forever? That's exactly what today's sponsor, Blinkist, can do for you. How many times have you seen a book and thought, gee, that looks really interesting. I wonder if I could read it in 14 minutes. Well, if you're like me, this happens all the time. I mean, reading's great, but I do have other stuff to do. I can't just sit down for 3 days in the middle of the week and devour a book, unless I'm on holiday. But I'm rarely on holiday. Fortunately, there's Blinkist, which condenses that meaty hardback you've been staring at into a quick summary. It's sort of like Cliff Notes, but for adults. With Blinkist, you can read a book on your lunch break, or better yet, do what I do and listen to a book summary like a podcast in the audio version. I walk to work every day, I pop in my headphones, and I listen to a Blinkist book. Blinkist has 14 million users and more than 3,000 titles to peruse. One that I've recently bookmarked is The Innovators by Walter Isaacson, who's the same guy who wrote the Steve Jobs biography. This is another one all about tech, exploring the social and cultural forces that have inspired technological change. It's a great listen, summarized in 19 minutes. Perfect. So if you're interested in learning big ideas in small packages, head to Blinkist.com/geographics, where the first 100 people will get a week to try out Blinkist for free, and you'll also get 25% off if you want the full membership. Again, 7-day trial, cancel at any time at Blinkist.com/geographics. And let's get back to the video. For Edmund Halley, the Great Comet of 1680 was a seminal event. At the time, the 24-year-old Englishman was traveling around Europe, meeting the great thinkers of his day. It was a heck of a time to be doing so. Earlier that century, Johannes Kepler had created his 3 laws of planetary motion, revolutionizing our understanding of the sky. Now new, more powerful telescopes were unveiling the mysteries of the cosmos, pushing Galileo's early discoveries to the limits. It was the era of Cassini, of Isaac Newton, of super brainy dudes being super interested in science. And Halley was about to join their ranks. In 1680, Halley was among the millions who looked skyward in wonder as the great comet streaked through the heavens. It was an experience he'd never forget, one that would lead to his name going down in history, but not attached to the Great Comet. That comet was a one-off event, streaking in and then zooming away. The comet that would bear Halley's name wouldn't appear until 2 years later. Even then, he wouldn't discover it. Yet it was the Great Comet that would give him the keys to his breakthrough, simply because it gave him something to talk about with Isaac Newton. When the two first met in 1682, Halley was doubtless aware of Newton's bad-tempered reputation, so he talked about something that would interest him, the 1680 comet. As a result, Newton wound up categorizing Halley as not just another boring dude to ignore, but as an almost friend. For Halley, this friendship would pay off big time. Cut ahead 2 years to 1684. While with his friends Robert Hooke and Christopher Wren, Halley got into a super brainy dissection of Kepler's 3 laws. The laws seemed to imply some unknown force keeping the planets in orbit around the sun, but no one could say what this force actually was or how to use it for making calculations. When Halley dropped in on his new pal Newton a few months later, he mentioned the discussion only for Newton to be all like, "Yeah, that's what I call gravity. I figured it out ages ago. What's for lunch?" Forcing Newton to develop and publish his theories quickly became Halley's life work. When Newton ran into financial trouble, Halley bankrolled him. Well, that was Principia Mathematica, the basic starting point of physics as we know it. But if you want to learn about that, you can go watch our Newton video over on the sister channel Biographics. For today's story, the important point is that Halley found in Newton's work methods he could apply to other celestial objects. Objects like comets. For the next few years, Halley worked on his project to calculate the orbits of 24 comets. But it was only when he started working on the comet of 1682, overshadowed at the time by the Great Comet, that he found something wild. If Newton's theories were correct, then the 1682 comet would come past Earth every 75 or 76 years. Stunned, Halley looked for previous comet sightings to back his idea up. He found one in 1607 recorded by Kepler and another in 1531. As Halley himself put it, "I am more and more confirmed that we have seen that comet now 3 times since year 1531. More importantly, he made a bold prediction that the same comet would return again in 1758. Let's pause for a moment and take in how ballsy this was. Some of the greatest minds of Halley's day still thought comets were atmospheric phenomena. Even those who assumed they were celestial objects had never considered that they might be repeat visitors. If Halley's prediction came true, it would change our understanding of the solar system, of physics. And that's exactly what happened. At Christmas 1758, the comet was spotted through a telescope right on schedule. It became visible to the naked eye in March, but Halley, of course, was no longer around to see it. The astronomer had died 17 years earlier at the age of 85, certain to the very end that his prediction would be proved right. When it was, French astronomer Nicolas Louis de Lacaille proposed the comet be named in his honor. Halley's Comet has been carrying the visionary mathematician's memory ever since. Considering it was such a big deal in 1785, the next return of Halley's Comet in 1835 was something of a flop. Early 19th century people were all like, I'm way more into top hats than celestial phenomena, and they basically ignored it. In fact, the only thing of note that happened around this time was Mark Twain being born 2 weeks after the comet passed through the sky. In his old age, Twain would delight in noting that he came in with Halley's Comet and intended to go out with it again. Remarkably, he died just one day after it reappeared in 1910. But most people in 1910 were way too busy freaking out to remark on the coincidence. That's because Halley's 1910 visit was accompanied by planet-wide hysteria. Back in 1908, a comet known as Comet Morehouse had appeared in the sky. Thanks to scientific advances, it was one of the first comets to be photographed on plates and studied on spectra. The results showed its tail containing the toxic gas cyanogen. And this was a problem because Earth's orbit was projected to pass right through the tail of Halley's Comet when it reappeared. As 1910 approached, worries about this gigantic cloud of poison began to ripple through the press. In France, the authorities decided to tackle the panic by asking a famous astronomer, Camille Flammarion, to address the public's fears. Unfortunately, Flammarion took this as an opportunity to terrify everybody. In a spectacularly misjudged speech, Flammarion said that the comet probably didn't have enough toxic gas in its tail to cause a problem, but if it did, then all life on Earth would be extinguished in minutes. Care to guess which part of that sentence the press focused on? Although other scientists rushed to assure the world that any cyanogen would decompose in Earth's upper atmosphere, the damage had been done. Flammarion's speech did for Halley's Comet what shoddy research and misreported blood clots can do for vaccines, send people absolutely loco about. In the US, people tried to seal their doors and windows to keep the poison out. In Europe, locals filled the streets of Paris for one last dance. In Oklahoma, a cult supposedly even tried sacrificing virgins to appease the angry comet, although it's hard to find any contemporary sources backing that story up. Finally, during the night of May the 18th to May the 19th, 1910, the Earth went zooming through Halley's dust tail, and billions held their breath. And, of course, nothing happened. As you can probably tell from the fact you're watching this, all animal life wasn't wiped out by Halley's Comet. The worst that happened was that a lot of people probably woke up the next morning feeling rather embarrassed about declaring their love to the cute girl at the apothecary. The Comet Panic of 1910 was a great example of a little bit of knowledge being a dangerous thing. Humanity had evolved beyond thinking comets were omens of doom, only to then invent a scientific reason why we should still be scared of them. Thankfully, the next time Halley's returned, would have moved beyond panics or even detached scientific observation. This time, humanity was going to get up close and personal with our constant companion. While Halley's was busy whizzing out beyond the orbit of Neptune, towards its aphelion, or furthest point from the Sun, some 5.2 billion kilometers away, scientists on Earth were trying to figure out what exactly comets were. We knew by now that they were celestial bodies, and we also knew they weren't capable of mass poisoning the Earth. But what really were they? What did they consist of? The leading theories were the sandbank theory, stating that the nucleus was a collection of dust and gases, and then there's the dirty snowball, which basically means the nucleus is solid ice. With both theories sounding plausible, it was eventually decided the best way to figure it out would just be to fly something up to the comet and see. Care to guess which comet they picked? The first sighting of Halley's return occurred on October the 16th, 1982, when it was still beyond Saturn. By then, plans were already in place for our first encounter with it. Sadly, they would only lead to one of NASA's greatest tragedies. The 1986 Challenger disaster is remembered today for many reasons: for being broadcast live, for being wholly preventable, and for killing Krista McAuliffe, supposed to be the first teacher in space. But what's less remembered is its connection to Halley's Comet. One of the main reasons Challenger took flight that fateful day was to deploy a satellite for monitoring Halley's as it passed Earth, part of a multinational effort to image the comet up close. Instead, America watched in horror as the Challenger broke apart, killing everyone on board. The idea that comets are bad omens may be superstitious nonsense, but sadly, in this case, it was also true. With NASA out of the game, the job of meeting Halley's Comet fell to a scattering of probes known as the Armada. Supplied by Japan, the USSR, and the European Space Agency, or ESA, they swung into action in March of 1986, taking pictures that would show us the comet as we'd never seen it before. And boy, did they ever succeed. Their shots of Halley's nucleus surrounded by white jets of gas is one of the defining space images of the decade. Taken by the ESA's probe from a distance of 600 kilometers, they proved once and for all that comet nuclei are solid. More than that, though, they allowed us to finally meet our long-term visitor. Tens or hundreds of thousands of years ago, the first humans to spot the comet had looked skyward and been paralyzed with wonder, or maybe fear at the sight of it. For countless millennia since, it had excited the passions of people on Earth, leading to scientific breakthroughs, appearances in art, maybe even invasions and conquest. At long last, seeing it as it really was, a piece of primordial ice and dirt on a lonely journey through our solar system. It was a moment no one prior to the 20th century could have imagined, a spectacular human achievement. And for now, that's where we have to leave it. After Halley's retreated out of the inner solar system, it passed beyond the distance where even our most powerful telescopes could image it. Now there's nothing we can do but wait. Wait for our constant companion to come back around for another visit and see how things have changed. Already, its return looks set to be spectacular. When it passed Earth in 1986, the comet was at its dimmest ever recorded. That means almost no one alive today, with the exception of super lucky people like Kanye Tanaka, born in 1903 and still alive in spring 2021, have seen what it's really capable of. But next time will be different. On its next pass in July 2061, Halleys Comet is set to be much brighter than last time. If you're going to hang on for another 40 years, that means you're going to be in for a hell of a show. What of the future, though? How much longer will our celestial companion be with us? The answer is no one knows. Every time a comet the size of Halley's swings around the sun, it loses up to 3 meters of material from its nucleus. As enough material is ejected, the comet eventually dims, losing its bright tail. Eventually, it may just disintegrate, or else get caught by Jupiter's gravity and torn apart. For the average periodic comet, it's thought that this happens around the 1000th orbit. Since our time frame for Halley's beginning its journey is anywhere between 16,000 and 200,000 years ago, that means it could die relatively soon, or it could continue for tens of thousands more years. However long it takes, we know for certain that so long as it's around, Halley's Comet will continue to watch over us, to inspire us, perhaps even terrify us. Like the best kind of old friend, its novelty may wear off, but we'll never grow tired seeing it. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, please do check out a fantastic sponsor, Blinkist, linked to below. And thank you for watching.